Were released this morning by editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, after multiple top officials, including President Trump, insisted nothing classified was in that chat.
The texts show that while no details about a specific target were shared, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was delivering up-to-the-minute attack plans about the March 15th strikes against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. One message reads, in part, quote, 14:15, referring to the 15 Eastern time, strike drones on target. This is when the bombs will definitely drop.
Leading us off this hour, NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell and NBC News intelligence reporter Luz. Kelly, let's start with you because Secretary Hegseth is the one who appears to have sent the messages about the timing of the strikes. He just spoke today for the first time since this entire chat was released. What did we hear?
Well, a fierce defense from Secretary Hegseth, who is traveling and spoke to reporters briefly. At first, he had said no war plans, and now that the full conversation, as far as we understand it from the reporting of The Atlantic, is out, he insisted further about what was not there. The administration is saying this was not classified material, and they are really doubling down on that. They're not addressing the fact that there's sensitive material in there, certainly to the average person's understanding, and certainly we have heard from people who have served in the military, who've been attached to the military, who have real concerns about the security of this information. Hegseth pushed back when he spoke to reporters a short time ago.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
What the Secretary has not addressed is whether it was prudent to put that sensitive information, which, as you showed, does give times, does talk about targets broadly, and so forth, whether that was appropriate and whether he has made any mistakes in this. That specifically, but has attacked the reporter and the publication, so has the White House, accusing them of somehow mishandling this when they have been inadvertently invited into the chat and were able to see what was discussed before the attacks happened.
Hey, Kelly, thank you. Dan, I want to go to you because we heard the Secretary say this was not war plans, but it was attack plans. In the military and intelligence community, what kind of content is classified? And what ramifications could a security breach have for intelligence relationships with other countries?
Well, it's a fundamental principle throughout the military and throughout the intelligence community, and not only in the U.S., of course, and that is that any government wants to keep secret, keep classified any information about significant military operations. And the Defense Department's own guidelines say that very openly, very clearly. The intelligence community has similar guidelines. And of course, there are laws that prohibit sharing or disclosing information to unauthorized persons and information that's considered national defense information. And the reason is you don't want to put your troops and your pilots at risk if that information somehow got into the hands of your adversaries. And keep in mind that the Defense Secretary was sharing very precise timing about when fighter jets would be launched, when drones would be launched, even when some of the first bombs were supposed to drop in Yemen against those Houthi forces. So there is a real question here how this could possibly be permissible, and certainly whether it's appropriate. We did hear today Secretary of State Rubio saying that it was a mistake, that it was a big mistake that a journalist got onto that group chat, but he also echoed the White House line otherwise.
And Kelly, let's get to the point of consequences and an outstanding question. I know on Capitol Hill today, one Democratic representative, Chrissy Houlihan, who's a former Air Force officer, said in part that had this happened to me, I would have walked my resignation in immediately. Is there a sense that Secretary of Defense Hegseth or National Security Advisor Mike Waltz could be at risk of losing their jobs?
To officials here, and there are no outward signs at this point that anyone at that level is going to take responsibility in a way of leaving their position. Certainly, Mike Waltz has said he was responsible for creating the chat. The Secretary of Defense has talked about being responsible for the content he put on the conversation over the Signal app. But we don't see any sign yet that anyone will be reprimanded, disciplined, fired, or offer a resignation. In fact, the president has certainly supported Mike Waltz, and the administration has talked about their faith in Secretary Hegseth. So at this point, no indication. That can always change as further information becomes available, and pressure, should it build, could make that change down the line.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell and Dan DeLuce, thank you both.
Breaking news now from the Supreme Court. The justices have ruled to uphold regulations on so-called ghost guns.
Those are weapons that are often found online and can be assembled at home. They do not have serial numbers, which makes them very difficult to trace. The Biden administration put restrictions in place back in 2022. Today, in a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court rejected a challenge to those rules.
NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett joins us now. So, Laura, unlike previous Supreme Court cases, this one did not directly involve the Second Amendment, right? Remind us how we got to this decision.
Yeah, it's not sort of your typical gun rights case, at least as we've seen it over the last couple of years. This is really about whether the federal government has the ability to regulate the sale of these kits, because they obviously require some work to put together. It's not a firearm like the one you see on your screen all built together. They require some assembly. Because they require assembly, the question was, does it meet the definition of a firearm? And at least as it relates to some of them, the Supreme Court says, yes, it may not be for all of them for all time, but at least as it relates to some of them, and that's why it's a victory, obviously, for gun control advocates that had wanted to see these remain illegal on the market.
So does the buck stop with the Supreme Court here? I know these regulations have been in place for years, and is there a sense that there could be any legal challenges at this point?
I think that the buck stops, at least as it relates to these. Doesn't mean that there won't be other regulations that the ATF tries. That doesn't mean there won't be additional lawsuits, but at least on this one, this is the end of the road.
And the Supreme Court has upheld gun rights, to remind people, right, in
bump stocks, other
cases.
Ones. Yeah, and they have a typically expansive view as it relates to gun rights, but I think because this one was so much more focused on the regulation as opposed to just a broad Second Amendment right, that's probably, I think, why they ruled the way they did.
So not an indication necessarily that things are changing at the Supreme Court.
No, I would not see this as a reading of the tea leaves, that they're going to be more open to gun regulations going forward.
All right, Laura Jarrett with that breaking news for us. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Time